recognize this gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Magaziner. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman. You know, I was excited to come over here because this hearing is supposed to be about national parks, and I could not wait to have a conversation with my colleagues who are apparently so concerned about the state of our national parks. Perhaps because they are so concerned, they will reconsider the budget bill that they are trying to move that would cut $436 million from the National Park Service, a 13% cut from last year. Because they care so deeply about national parks, perhaps they will rethink their stance on H.R. 21, a bill that would enable more than $400 million of public land to be given to the oil and gas companies for drilling. When we were debating that, the ranking member, Mr. Grijalva, put in an amendment that would prevent any new drilling in national parks. My Republican colleagues voted that amendment down. Perhaps now they will reconsider. Perhaps they will reconsider their support of President Trump's failed plan to remove 35 million acres from federal protection, the only president in history to have removed more federal land from protection than he added. And maybe they will rethink the language that they put into the House rules this year to value all federal land at $0, the sole purpose of which is to make it easier to discharge protected lands from federal protection. So slashing funding from public parks and the National Park Service, opening up protected land to oil and gas drilling, privatization, this is not how you protect national parks, which I am glad to hear my colleagues care so deeply about. I hope that they will work with us in a bipartisan way on real policies to strengthen and support our national parks program. And I hope that they will show even a little bit of concern for the people who are unhoused in New York City. To be clear, these are human beings, many of whom came to this country through a legal process, something that my colleagues often fail to acknowledge. In many cases, these are migrants fleeing cartel violence, human trafficking, persecution from their governments. And they, in many cases, came to legal points of entry at the border to apply for legal asylum through a legal process under our laws, and are now waiting for their cases to be heard, unhoused in New York and other places. So let's be clear about what we're talking about here. We are talking about, in New York City, one former airport. It still has runways being used for temporary housing for people who, in many cases, are using a legal process to attempt to immigrate to our country. We're not talking about Yellowstone. We're not talking about the Rocky Mountains National. We're not talking about iconic national parks. Although, unfortunately, if members of the public are interested in visiting those parks, they are not going to be able to do so next week because of the Republican government shutdown that is looming. All we're talking about, though, when it comes to temporarily housing migrants, is an airport in Brooklyn. Come on. Let's get serious here about real immigration reform that improves security, that provides legal avenues for an orderly system. And let's talk about real policies to protect our national parks from budget cuts, from drilling. Let's protect our national parks. That is what the work of this committee is supposed to be about. So with that, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back.